Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. I am honored to speak with our guest today. His journey has been an extensive one through learning about different types of healing, from spiritual psychology to yoga teaching certification to a clinical master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine to becoming ordained in ministry through a meditation-focused apprenticeship in Sikh Dharma. I will let him tell you more about himself, so please join me in welcoming Amaratma to The Conscious Artist. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Pallavi, I'm so grateful. So wonderful to connect. Thank you for the introduction and the invitation to this.
You're so welcome, and I truly must thank you. It's a privilege and it's an honor to speak with you today. And I remember when I came across your work on Instagram and started following you, I realized that two of my own friends and contacts actually follow you as well. One is a dear friend, and the other one is an esteemed physician and brain health coach, Dr. Emily Wong, who is actually on my very first season of this podcast. So I definitely think this was meant to be that I get to chat with you today.
Oh, I love it. I love the connections and how social media connects us in ways that we wouldn't be in connection at all. I hear today that you're actually living in Madrid and I'm in California. And so how social media connects our worlds together is so powerful. I'm so grateful to that connection.
Same here. It's incredible. I actually was so thankful that you saw my DM on Instagram and you were willing to actually be here and have this conversation. So truly, thank you for being here. Today's topic is about grief. And while it's a heavy one, I think it's also one that is not often enough talked about, and I feel like we often don't have enough tools to know how to handle grief when it comes to us. And most of the time, grief comes in unexpected ways. Grief is often described as a strong, sometimes overwhelming emotion for people, and it's often related to death. But for me personally, it's almost impossible to put the feeling that we experience with grief into words. And furthermore, people can feel grief from events and situations that don't even involve death. For example, like a divorce or losing your job or becoming a parent and suddenly losing who you were before kids, right? Of course, grief caused by death is generally the most inescapable because death is the most finite and permanent loss we can experience. But it has so many different layers and levels. And for that reason, I really wanted to chat with you today. So thank you so much in advance for your expertise, because I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for giving this good introduction to it. Absolutely. I would say that grief is less of an emotion and more of a response. And it's a response to any change or end of something that is familiar in our life. And I think that then opens us up for a larger conversation about a grief response to losses that include death, but are also beyond death, non-death related grief. And as you mentioned, there are several different types of losses that we might have. The divorce is a huge loss. Moving can, for a child, can be a very powerful loss. Change of jobs, being laid off or fired, financial difficulties, becoming a parent, losing a sense of autonomy or independence, even though it comes with a child and something that's so exciting. There's a profound change in an identity or a reality that comes in there. And these are types of losses that we don't really recognize or give acknowledgement to, but have a power that's existing within us that in the realm of grief or emotional health, or even a form of spiritual health, psychological health, and even physical health, this sort of continuum of the body, mind, and spirit. There are a lot of iterations around unresolved grief from elements of our life that we may have thought as a grief response are actually taking up that internal bandwidth or that processing or our own vitality. And so I'm a person who has understood Chinese medicine, which is education and teaching around optimal health, and wanting to understand the root causes of disease and pathology, for me, at a much more emotional oriented level. And my work in chaplaincy outside of my acupuncture practice was working in end of life situations in the hospital. I was in the ICUs, I was in the emergency room, I was in the trauma bay, I worked in palliative care. I worked with death at the most abrupt and most overwhelming aspects of life, the ones of that are the worst fears that we all feel and have, that cancer diagnosis or a car accident where we lose somebody abruptly was the realm in which I worked with for several years, a better part of a decade. And in that experience, I came to understand that there are so many different types of losses that we experience, and getting to an understanding of one of the root aspects that are leading to our culture or our world or our own individuality that is not feeling well. Oh, let's look at grief. Grief might be the linchpin to help transform our life into a place of that vitality or that optimal health, or to increased experiences of joy or aliveness or empowerment or confidence. It can really lead us into a lot of different areas of our life to feel better at. But we got to bring that exposure to a part of our life that is maybe unseen or unacknowledged in our life.
Wow, this is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think you highlighted an important point, which is grief comes in many, many different forms. It comes from a variety of events, and it doesn't have to be death alone, like I mentioned, and thank you for clarifying that. But I want to ask you, why do you think it is that we as a society have such a difficult time with grief? Do you think it's because we're not really taught tools for how to handle this kind of response to events?
It's kind of a combination of things, to be honest. On one aspect, we have a culture and society that suppresses emotions. In some ways, we've been doing this for centuries. We've sort of developed that through our economic systems, through our increased productivity, like the Industrial Revolution, this element of autonomy with capitalism, the Cartesian methodology of philosophical thought, where there's a mind body dualism. There's an element of our culture and our society, in Western culture specifically, I wouldn't say Eastern culture, but Western for sure, in which we have felt that feelings or emotions are an aspect of weakness or failure, that vulnerability is an aspect of some sort of liability of our humanity, and that we have to strive to override our impulses, our emotional impulses, and apply logic and rationale, and to apply our intellect. And our intellect is our most powerful form of our humanness as man, as humanity. And I think that while that has been able to create skyscrapers and technology and information that we can have at a click of a button, in some ways, our culture and our society has evolved to say that emotions equal weakness, that feelings are failure, that vulnerability is fragility. And that is far from the truth. And we're in a place right now, probably more so post pandemically, that we're coming to recognize how important emotional health is for our overall aspect of health. And that grief is not a pathology, it's not a disease, it's not a mental health illness. It's a normal and natural response to loss of any kind. And so, in the work that I do with people that I do one to one work, or in my courses, or in forms of education and programs that I offer, what I've come to appreciate is that some of the work we do in grief work is actually unlearning how we think about emotions and how we have misinterpretation or miseducation around grief, that we have to have, hey, we have to think about it in a whole new way. And this is one of the reasons why I think grief is so overwhelming for us as a culture and a society, and universally, is because we've adopted a lot of ways in which we have not allowed ourselves to grieve losses that have been perpetuating since childhood. And we kind of suppress them or bury them or bottle them up inside us, which then now we know from our traumatology work and our researchers that the body does keep the score, and that out of sight, out of mind, compartmentalizing, tucking under the rug techniques that we do for our emotions actually the body is keeping the receipts on those and feeling that. So when we have something that's like a very powerful loss that comes into our life, something that we can't deny, something we can't avoid, something we can't acknowledge, and it's powerful, it opens us to a place of our heart that is exposing then a lot of the other grief or losses that we haven't processed. And then it becomes like a tidal wave. That's been, oh my God, it's so much. So not only are we experiencing the acuity of the grief of the loss of the moment, but also the accumulation of loss that has been there for a long time. Like a wave that's been building and building and building. And we only see the break of the wave, the white water of the wave, but that wave has been building on a long shore. And that's something that I paid attention to. We have to give focus to non death related grief and how we might be holding on to or not processing and how that might be impacting our life overall.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I could not agree more with what you've said. And it's only been in my own work doing therapy for the last couple years that I've also started to like open Pandora's box and really start to go layer by layer down to find like the root of any issue that I'm dealing with, or any big response or emotion that I'm feeling to something. Like, where is it really coming from? What is the root? What is being triggered here? And I think it's such an important point that you pointed out how we don't in society, at least historically, we've not allowed space for people to feel their emotions.
That's right.
Because being vulnerable is weak, or showing your emotions is weak. And that's not just for men. But by the way, I think it affects men first and foremost, because toxic masculinity has a rippling effect throughout generations of men, which of course filters into generations of women. And for me, like being vulnerable, I don't know what I used to think vulnerable meant before. I mean, I knew what it meant, but I don't really know what I associated it with. But I know that today, when I use the word vulnerable, for me, it just means someone being their true, authentic self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that's it. I don't think of it as like a negative word or a quote unquote weak word. I think it takes courage to be vulnerable. I think it takes strength to be vulnerable, to show yourself, to show who you really are,
for sure.
and to be able to like bring that to the surface when you're dealing with really difficult things rather than suppressing them and trying to hide that away, trying to quote unquote be strong for others, or, oh, I shouldn't burden this person with my issues or with my grief or with my problems. I feel like we lack tools as a society to really process. And I really appreciate, by the way, that you said it's a response and not an emotion, because even I made that mistake in the way that I explained it earlier. It is a response, right? And so
Yes.
could you actually explain a little bit more about that? Why is it a response rather than an emotion? And like what's the difference between that?
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned here around tools, around how to do this, is very important. And before I answer that particular question, I want to speak to the earlier part of what you mentioned, because I think that's where we're at. We're in a time of awakening, we're in a time of profound transformation, and it's kind of chaotic right now. There's a lot of collective experiences in the world that is existing even during the pandemic and even prior to the pandemic, that we were experiencing a lot of chaos. So, the work that I like to do is called World Peace Through Inner Peace. It's the experience of finding those root aspects, what I refer to as maybe the grief backpack or a grief inventory, to get an understanding of what losses in a primary loss, like a major death, or maybe even minor or micro losses, like some things from earlier childhood, or even as recent as losing a friend to moving to the other side of the country and not having that closeness that's there. These are profound experiences. When we bring awareness to that, can be like, oh my goodness. And the release that happens through it comes through initially in acknowledging the honesty about how it is that we are experiencing the moment. There's a lot of power in that. And the world right now is waking up to this. You're doing a podcast on this. You're a phenomenal musician and you're doing a podcast on mental health conversations. The world is waking up. And so through that, we are now open to the tools, not just of grief, but of letting go. And that being one of the key features of this. We're a culture that does not know how to let go. We haven't been trained in how to let go. It's a skill set, like a muscle that you can develop. And from childhood, we haven't learned about emotional resiliency and emotional health and what to do when we lose something. We do many things like you mentioned, being strong for somebody else or replacing the loss, like a child who, lost a toy. Okay, let's just get another toy. Let's just go get some ice cream and make us feel better. Or we have a culture of workaholism and just staying busy and productivity all the time to avoid and distract. So, in some ways, we're waking up to what is not working for us to then open us to new tools that we can bring into the conversation. And I think that that's very powerful that you tapped into that, because what you're mentioning are what we refer to as the myths of grief, and changing our language and opening our mind to ways in which we can say, oh my goodness, I might be holding on to something that is not serving me anymore. So the tool becomes, how do I let that go? How do I apply
Mm.
new skill sets into ways in which I can release something that seems like I should be holding on, but I don't. It's actually making me more stuck. I'm self sabotaging myself from the life and dream that I'm wanting to live. Oh my goodness. How do I do that work? That becomes like a big question in regards to grief work, which inherently talks about letting go work, which is really about unlocking joy. That's the fun part about this.
Wow. Oh my goodness. You just reminded me. I have written down a quote that you had put on your Instagram story. This was maybe a handful of weeks ago. And I wrote it down because it was so powerful for me. And I want to share it with our audience. You said, letting go is a body, mind, emotion, and spirit process. It's like different channels or currents, each one needing support. Most times we only think of the mind for letting go, but the body needs its own support for letting go, as well as the emotions, and so does the spirit. Each aspect needs its own set of techniques and care for letting go. It's truly a life skill we have not been taught.
Yes.
I remember when you said this, I was like, oh my God, I took a screenshot, saved it. And I said, yes, absolutely. Because you mentioned also earlier that our body keeps score. And it was just so powerful reading this, because I was fixating myself on sort of letting go as being a mental activity and a mental homework to do.
Mhm.
But it's not only part of the mind.
That's right. And that's our awakening right now, is that we think that it all has to come through the intellect. That's how we've been taught. That's our methodology over the last 100 or so years, is all in the intellect. It's all in the mind. It's all in the logic, all in the rationale, all in that place there. And that's not truly the case. Yes, we might have self critical thoughts that we need to let go. We might have self limiting thoughts that we need to work on letting go. And there are techniques that we apply for aspects of our thought process or our intellect that require some letting go. But we can't apply intellect or our mind for emotional letting go. No way. No, the emotions require its own style and techniques to be able to help to release emotions. For the body, we can't apply the same mental or even spiritual elements for the body. We got to be able to apply techniques for the body to help it let go, that it holds on to perhaps tension in the tissues, or elements where we have chronic pain or inflammation, that which the body holds on to, or constipation, our inability to kind of let go digestively or digest life. And so we have to apply different techniques to help support different varying levels. So I've created a program that speaks to this, because I've come to realize through my grief work that there are several ways in which grief work, okay, we need to identify the grief. Well, that's very heavy. Okay, I got to go into a grief backpack. Oh my God, that's a lot. But it doesn't have to be when we know that there are techniques for letting go. So, through a process that I've evolved with, I call it the fivefold process or fivefold methodology of release and letting go. And it's tapping into sort of an ancient practice of Chinese medicine and Ayurveda to create an insight to an ancient principle of understanding ways in which we can let go at a large level that incorporates a body, mind, emotion, and spirit level, to apply different techniques, artistic techniques, fun techniques, ritual practices, body based somatic work that allows us to really come into a relationship of, oh my goodness, life skill that I have never learned that I can apply to my life to really unlock joy, unlock peace, unlock empowerment and confidence in our life.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Really, I am so interested in learning more. And you just mentioned somatic healing, and I was wondering if you could go a little bit more in detail about that because I personally am not so well versed in it, and I would love to learn more.
Absolutely. A lot of times we wonder about how the body stores emotions or why it is that we feel heaviness or maybe even chronic pain or inflammation in the body. So we have to appreciate that the body is a big reservoir for unprocessed emotions. And we have a culture and a society with a lot of chronic illness and a lot of inflammatory disease processes. And there is starting to be further education that's explaining that suppressing emotions as a coping mechanism might actually be doing more harm for us than actually good. Well, it might provide us a temporary relief to compartmentalize because I don't want to break down, melt down, fall apart in a situation with family or with friends or at a dinner party or at a holiday event. That continual chronic suppression actually leads to a lot of challenges that our body carries. And this is a lot in terms of pretty dynamic science around the autonomic nervous system and neuroendocrine function. And so to do somatic oriented healing is sort of a recognition of sort of the physiology and energetic elements that are existing within how the body stores unprocessed emotions. So then somatic healing work or mind body exercises are utilizing different breathing techniques and movement practices to help do one, create safety in the body, to create co-regulation, to create what we refer to in the polyvagal theory as ventral vagal state. It's a little bit more technical, but it's really about bringing in relaxation. It's about bringing in safety. It's about bringing in a way in which we can access the body's natural intelligence and healing homeostasis response. Those techniques work at a little bit more of an energetic level. And so for me, I'm an acupuncturist. I'm a Chinese medical practitioner. And so I understand acupuncture points, but also the flow of channels called meridians that underlie these acupuncture points. How is it that a point between my thumb and my index finger and that soft, cushy area, when I press on it, can alleviate headaches and make it so that I have relief in my digestion and clear my sinuses and help me with letting go? Because underneath that point is a huge reservoir of a channel that helps to build in a network, like a freeway system through the body. And so I utilize mind body oriented techniques and mindfulness to work with moving that flow of energy to release stagnation, blockages in those channels, which prevents life force energy from being able to move through our body. And in allowing that to create openness and flow, we start to have now our resilience. We start to now have confidence. We now have inspiration. We now have courage. We now have centeredness and groundedness. And at the same time, we can release a lot of emotions through the body, like anger and fear and sadness and overwhelm and worry and rumination and anxiety. We can do a lot of things through the body, and somatic oriented work are varying levels of techniques and practices that can help us to create a little bit more internal peace and centeredness while helping to release some of the emotional experiences as well.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay. So Eastern cultures and Eastern traditions and practices have been aware of the connection between the body, the mind, and the emotions and the soul for millennium, right?
Yes. The textbooks I had in Chinese medicine were 2,000 years old. They
Wow.
were translations of texts that were done. And this is not like textbooks that we would say, like somebody just writing something about culture and nature or writing on bamboo or paper like this. This is like medical conferences that were taking place, that if the president of the United States or any culture or society was bringing in a medical team like the NIH and they say, we want to understand the ideas of longevity and vitality, it was like somebody was transcribing the conference and bringing in the points that were of major reference those are the textbooks that were utilized in Chinese medical training.
Wow.
It was like the mass conference that was taking place at that time. And so then we get an understanding that there was a robustness of a medical system that was well understood in China that was giving us resources and based on thousands and thousands of clinical trials, observation, case study reports that created a whole methodology around diagnosis and treatment and assessment and practical application for it that is very, very useful now. And all of a sudden, you're right, all of a sudden, right now, our culture, our society has mind body dualism. That's where we exist within our emotional health. We're starting to understand it better that all things are kind of connected more than we ever thought. But we can now tap into ancient practices to utilize those techniques that have been known and have been taught and have been mastered. They're core techniques that we can now apply for not only our emotional health, but our overall vitality.
For example, like Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, like the work that you have trained yourself in is actually part of our roots and our heritage. Do you feel that that has been able to sort of give you a slight advantage in the way that you're able to approach your work working in the West?
Absolutely. And especially right now in this time, because I think we are in a big awakening around research. Modern research is giving a lot more understanding to the science of these ancient practices. So we kind of have the ancient and the modern coming together. And because I've been doing this work for the better part of 20 years, 22 years that I've been studying and educating, the time is now where, for me, I was working in the hospitals. I was working in my private practice. I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I was kind of off the map, off the grid, so to say. For me, just doing my work and practicing and helping. But I just felt that I had to expose and to share this sort of uniqueness and relative innovative and slightly novel perspectives about bridging many worlds together to have a cohesive and comprehensive way in which we think about body, mind, emotion, spirit, health. And I feel like there's a part of the work, especially around grief, because grief is the root, and now applying a multifaceted, multidimensional approach to treating and working with grief. I wouldn't say treating because I don't want to pathologize it, but working with grief work to then teach us how to let go is like that sphere of genius that I've been working on for 20 years. It is the work of right now, and it is almost the work of my life, like my personal strife and challenge and difficulty that I myself personally have gone through to try to find my way through therapy and through teacher trainings and master's educations and apprenticeship programs and deep, dedicated, meditative oriented work has allowed me to kind of share with the world a way in which we can say, hey, there's more to this than we are appreciating. And it's so much easier and simpler than we think it can be. We can actually have a lot of health and vitality in very, very simple ways. Here's the way that we can do that. Super simple.
That's really incredible. I remember one of my trips to India. I was there for a couple weeks and I wasn't there to specifically work with a yoga teacher, but I had a great guru that I happened to be working with while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him teaching us about all of the different asanas for aiding digestion, or if you have trouble with your kidneys, if you have trouble with your liver, if you have tension in this part of your body, if you're experiencing this in this part. And it was just, I mean, for me, of course, like also being Indian, I've gravitated in my life more towards homeopathy, Ayurveda, more natural practices, more holistic practices. And I think I wasn't really aware of how truly accurate the phrase "your body stores emotions" was until
Yes.
about a year and a half ago, where I found out I was betrayed by somebody who was extremely important to me previously in my life. And I was so angry, like I've never been in my life, to the point where I felt like the anger was poison inside my body. And for the first time in my life, I actually confronted someone. Like I confronted the person, and that confrontation was the first time in my life that I'd ever experienced something like that. I kind of grew up a people pleaser and would just let everything go and then build up resentment. And this was the first time where I said, no, I need to express what I'm feeling because I need to get this out of my system. And it was also a matter of justice. I mean,
Yes.
this person had been lying and lying and lying and lying for years. And finally finding this out, saying what I needed to say, it was like extracting poison. And unfortunately, the person continued to manipulate and deny everything to my face, although I had very clear evidence. But I didn't need the person to apologize. I didn't need them to acknowledge my truth because I knew what was the truth. I knew what was right. And what was important for me was just to express it. And I think that was a very important distinction, that I didn't need the other person to acknowledge, but I needed to extract it from my body.
Yeah.
And I managed to do that. I managed to have this confrontation. I managed to get it all out. And it was the craziest experience of my life. And then for 2 months after that, I had sciatica
Oh, wow.
because all of that anger and that feeling of betrayal went just straight into my back.
Mm.
And that was, I think, my first really big experience with how connected emotions and the body are.
Yes. Wow. Wow.
So I would love if you could share a little bit with us about how emotions get stored in our body. And I know there isn't like a little chart that's like, oh, if you're feeling anger, you're going to feel it here. If you're feeling sadness, you're going to feel it here. But there's a general sort of way for us to be able to identify when something is blocked. Perhaps sometimes we feel the emotions first and then it shows up in our body later, or perhaps something is not right in our body, or as you said before, like with our digestion, or in my case, it was sciatica. I'm just curious to know, like, how is it that emotions get stored in our body, and how can we help ourselves identify and move through that?
Yeah, Pallavi, thank you. First, before answering that question, I just want to create a moment of just recognition and honor for you sharing. Thank you so much. That was remarkable and powerful.
Thank you. That wasn't easy.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I by no means want to be able to, I can't move on because of how powerful just your openness and your expression here in this time to share, and want to give just recognition and then celebrate you for the nature of that work. That sounds like that was a remarkably challenging time of your life. And to be hit with that feeling, like you mentioned, betrayal, and to have this anger coming through you that felt like a poison that was eating you up inside, that led to processing it and coming with a confrontation, not for an apology or for anything that you needed from that person, but for yourself, especially as a person, as you mentioned, who has often been a more of a people pleaser and sort of let it go in a way in which of kind of pushing it out of your mind, which then built and created resentment for yourself. And that this confrontation was really a powerful cathartic experience of you coming into an honor and recognition of yourself, and that you deserve more and deserve better. And that became the place of release for you. And really want to honor what you have just shared and how that kind of evolved through your system and through your being, and not just move on with the next part of the conversation without giving recognition to that. Wow, that is so powerful.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. It was the hardest period of my life, for sure.
Yeah.
And that experience was, as I said, the first time I'd ever confronted someone. And it was a turning point because it was the first time I took my power back.
Yeah, look at that experience there. And I imagine that you did some really profound inner work on yourself. And this wasn't just all of a sudden you came into this power. You came into an introspective place. You came in honoring and an acknowledgement and attuned to how you truly felt about the situation, that gave you a place that says, wow, it seems like there is a death taking place. There's something very powerful moving through my being, like a death that's not a death, but a death of a part of self, or a death of a relationship, or a connection to who you were, that almost created a birthing to this new power and this new transformation. It's really important for us to honor and acknowledge this, because these are kind of the things that we don't often talk about publicly or to speak about. But the end of life work that I've done with people, holding the hands with somebody in hospice care, or actively dying, or being with family members that has somebody who is transitioning out of this world, it is these moments of life that people speak about most. It was that profound intensity, the suffering, or the place in life that created the transformation, that gave us into our power, that we come back in our life and look back and say, these were the times I was most grateful for. These are the times that launched me into the life that I became excited about to live. Now, I wish, now I'm this kind of guy, I wish it wasn't that suffering created so much transformation for us. I wish it was that we didn't have to suffer so deeply, or that we create meaning and purpose to life and just say, oh, okay, yeah, I'm better for what I've gone through. I'm a better person, that life won't give me more than I can handle. And, these sort of platitudes that we have to almost instigate a suppression. I imagine that not only was it the hardest part of your life for you, but it was one of the places where you leaned into your own personal growth and transformation to such a degree that you've then found your power. And so there was a catalyst, a fire that was burned inside through anger that created an opportunity of an openness to find this. And it was through your own desire. I think that normalizing these things are so powerful, and I want to bring that recognition and honoring to your transformative courage that helped bring this new phase of life that also helped build in the letting go of what was.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I have to say it's also a huge thanks to you, because I feel your healing qualities even just through the microphone, through the computer. And I mean, this is the first time actually here for my listeners. This is the first time I've talked about that incident publicly. So thank you also for making me feel safe to share. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I think, like I said, I think that we want to normalize these conversations, because I think we sometimes think that feelings are failures and emotions are weakness and vulnerability is about fragility. And here you are modeling for us what it means to be vulnerable and courageous, what it means to be in the exposure and expression that actually allows us for it. And I want to return that favor to you as well in terms of this, and share from my own side, if I may.
I would love that. Thank you.
Because I feel like, you're sharing, and it's like, I can meet that too. And in chaplaincy, we call this the threshold of vulnerability, where we can have a sort of a deeper sense of intimacy and connection with each other. So for me, I've actually been hiding for a long time. I grew up with a lot of the same things that you shared, people pleasing and really wanting to be invisible. I was bullied a lot growing up, and being invisible was sort of a survival mechanism for me. And I recognized that one of the ways that over the last 20 years of my development and my education and my work, that there's a pull, there's a draw for me to share and to openly communicate about things that I see, the way in which I see the world, the way in which I see emotions, that are just utterly, I think they're sophisticated and they're nuanced, and they're bringing so much to the table that we need at this time. And I feel like there's a lot of life purpose to be able to share openly about a worldview that I have from my unique educational background and personal life experience. But I've hid for so long. And in some part, because of old traumas and pains that I had from childhood around being bullied and feeling less than and having low self worth, that I've actually sought to be invisible. So inside me, there's been this push pull, this inner conflict around wanting to live into my power, wanting to live into something that I feel like I'm here to share, that gives me a sense of life purpose. And at the same time, be like, heck no, like, no way, absolutely not. Invisibility is what is keeping us alive and functional and in this world. That's been very powerful for me. And so a couple years ago, I decided that I said, no, I gotta start sharing. The pandemic was happening, life was changing. I transitioned out of hospital based care. I wanted to really open up into the world. And I knew that by doing so, I would be exposing myself and bringing about that. And I tell you, that has been so arduous. It has been so powerful and intense for me at a very deep level. I've never known transformation like this, and known kind of the barriers of my letting go. Oh, why can't I just come into more visibility? Why can't I come into a place of exposing more? I have enough education, enough credentials, and enough background and clinical experience to share and to educate and to teach on this. Why can't I do it to a level at which would feel that fulfillment? What is this thing that I'm holding on to? And coming into a relationship, I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. This is so hard for me. I'm feeling so insecure. It's bringing up a part of me that's really deeply kind of connected to inner child wounds, and was challenging for me to kind of come out of that. It's almost like there's multiple people in the car and my inner child is driving, not my adult functioning self, not my power. It's like my inner child is driving this car. And I'm like, no, you're going the wrong way. And I'm like a backseat driver. I'm like, no, turn left here. No, why are you getting off the freeway? And it's sort of like, oh, that's been my work. That's been my development. So somatic healing has transformed for me to around creating safety and doing practices that are about tranquility and flow and being at ease. A lot of my meditation practices are deeper breathing practices to really help with helping to alleviate some of the tension that exists within my body that I've been holding on to for a long time. Some of the work that I've been doing is really about self love and self praise and to really bring in and build up self esteem in a context and a technique and a practice that's called self praise. And sharing about how proud I am of myself, of the work that I've done and the courage that I've built into and the healing that I'm doing, but also the winning results, like showing up and being on social media and talking and receiving Paula V's podcast invitation and to share about these things and coming into a whole nother way and really applying the techniques for myself that I offer to people that I work with regularly and saying, hey, I'm human too. I'm not above and beyond all this. I still have things that I'm working on. And that's been really powerful for me also.
Thank you so much for sharing this and for trusting me and this platform to also open up. I so appreciate it. And I really agree with you. I mean, I think vulnerability is what leads to deeper connection and deeper intimacy. And like, I hope we have the chance to meet in person someday because I think it would be a very healing experience for sure. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Little bit of South Asian connection we got here, and
For
the
sure, of
connectivity,
course.
right? Yeah.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, could you tell us a little bit more about somatic healing and what are
Mhm.
some specific examples or tools that, perhaps my audience can take away with somatic healing?
Absolutely. Let's do a technique right now. This can be really simple, even though it's purely audio. One of the biggest elements that we need for, I would say, mind body healing or somatic release exercises is coming into a relationship of conscious breathing and our exhale breath. A lot of times we're holding on and we're not actually breathing effectively. So our emotions affect our body, and the body and its stress response affects how we breathe and creates this sympathetic stress response where we become shallow in our breath, breathing from our upper chest and our upper lobes of our lungs as opposed to a deeper breath. And so, how do we then work to utilize the body to help create an emotional change or mental clarity? There's a really simple breath that we can apply. So, let's take a moment here, sitting very comfortably, and let's take a deep breath. Inhale and just exhale very calmly, very relaxed. Just release the breath. Good. Let's do it again. Let's take a nice deep breath. Inhale. And expand as if you're building a balloon in your belly. Let your belly expand, inhaling the breath, and then exhaling the breath very consciously, very relaxed. All right, good. Now let's take a deep breath again, nice and slow through the nose. Now hold for just a moment, and now pursing the lips, start to exhale your breath very slowly through your mouth. And make it as long as you can without straining. Wonderful. Let's take a deep breath again. Inhale. Hold for just a moment. And now through the lips, slow exhale. Very soft, very subtle, and very slow. Very conscious. And feel the coolness at your lips as you do it, like a sensitivity. Very good. Deep breath again. Slow and inhale. Hold. And exhale very slowly. Once again, even with more intentionality, with more command. Very good. All right, nice deep breath. And exhale, release. This is an example of a very simple exercise that we can utilize to create state change, change in our physiology, getting us from a stress response to a relaxation response, helping us to let go of emotion tension. Sadness, particularly, is very effective for helping you utilize this breath when we're feeling sad or heavy. We're feeling a little overwhelmed or anxious. This breath kind of combines a lot of different emotional release exercises. It's for the mind as a letting go exercise as well. The exhaled breath is going to create a lot of calmness and tranquility. It's going to give us a little bit more insight and awareness. So, overall, this very simple technique, somatically done, 3 breaths, 30 seconds to a minute, can actually create a lot of letting go and transformation in a very, very basic exercise that's super effective.
Thank you so, so much for sharing this and for doing this with us. I was doing it while you were guiding us. And first of all, I'm so excited that the example you chose to share was about breathing, because I talk about breathing all the time. And I know we haven't spoken about music on today's episode, but as a pianist, it happens so often that pianists don't pay attention to their breathing at all at their instrument because we don't need breath control to play.
Mm.
Whereas, like, if you play a wind instrument or a
Mm.
brass instrument or
Mm.
you're a singer, you literally can only make a sound when you're exhaling.
Mm.
And so much of the work that I do with my own students and with myself is about paying attention to my breathing. And this occurred first and foremost because back in 2016, I had an injury in my, I think it was like from my trapezius up to my neck, where like a muscle just went into spasm and I couldn't turn my head left or right. And this was like right before a concert, like the evening before a concert.
Mm.
And when I went to the osteopath, he told me that I wasn't breathing correctly.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine? I'm so
Yep.
glad that you talked
Yep.
about this, because he told me I was breathing into my chest. I was shallow breathing. I was not allowing oxygen to fully go into my muscles. My muscles were contracting. They were becoming tense and holding that tension. And since then,
Yeah.
I started practicing breathing, and it's so funny you said, feel your belly like ballooning out. I use those exact same words. I promise you, I use the
Yep.
exact same
Yeah.
words.
Diaphragmatic
Yeah,
breathing. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Totally.
And I tell that to my students, like I'll make them, like I will have them like sit and breathe for like a full 60 seconds before, like just sitting at the piano bench before they even start to play, just to like become
Yeah.
regulated. And I teach them like how to feel their belly ballooning out as if you're deflating the balloon when you're exhaling. And it's so interesting how you described the difference between breathing in and out through your nose, which is something I do on a regular basis. Like now I've become so conscious of my breathing that it's become a natural part of my daily rhythm. And so it's almost impossible for me to breathe only into my chest. Like I feel like I can't breathe, like I'm not getting enough air.
Right. Yep.
But I have noticed when I am feeling very anxious about something, or like my anxiety is kicking in, automatically I will breathe in through my nose, but I will breathe out through pursed lips the way you're talking about. And I actually
Yes.
didn't realize that was a
Yes.
somatic exercise.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just like doing it instinctively because I was like,
Yeah.
I need to regulate my breath.
The body knows. The body
Yeah,
knows. Yeah. It doesn't have to be something that's so archaic or unfamiliar. We're doing this stuff all the time. We're just not aware that it's happening. But the
exactly.
body kind of knows. Like shaking is a really good technique as well. As a somatic exercise, shaking is so good to just release tension through the body. Dancing is such a way around helping to release and discharge excess emotional energy from the body. And dancing and shaking. I was like, what culture doesn't have dancing and shaking a part of their their
Wow.
process? And it's so simple. And so we can utilize these different techniques to create different states, so inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the nose, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, inhaling through the mouth, exhaling through the mouth. Different exercises can give us different experiences. And that's where it gets really sophisticated. That's where, for me as a practitioner or as a specialist in this work, I can apply different techniques to help support people in a journey of transformation and of healing. And combination of these things become somatic exercises or mind body series that I lead to create, this way in which we can do like an anger oriented set, releasing anger or frustration, or helping to alleviate sadness and understand the different mechanisms where sadness kind of gets stuck in our body. So that becomes really evolved. And that's part of my genius in the work I do.
This is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Thank you for being here with us. And thank you for everything that you do and share with the world. I am so grateful that I came across you on Instagram. Instagram is such a vortex that it's easy to fall into the void and not even be able to find certain things. And there must have been a reason that your work came up in my For You feed, and I immediately started following your work. And truly, thank you for also sharing a part of yourself today and your vulnerability with us. I really hope that we get to meet in person. And I will link your Instagram handle in the text, as always, so that for all of you listening out there, I hope you will go and follow Amaratma's work, because it is truly wonderful and truly needed in our society today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Pallavi, so much. So honored, so grateful, and really evolved conversation today that led itself to many layers and many levels of just talking about grief, but living in the grief and recognizing the normalcy of it, and bringing about both our own vulnerable experiences around losses that have happened in our life to come into a place and saying, hey, this is not something wrong with us. This might be something right about us. And we can utilize it as a way to not just create transformation and growth and maturation within our spirit, but to help us develop new skills of letting go, and to come into a way and saying there can be a really tremendous life that we can live no matter what the kind of pain or challenge or loss that we've had in our life, that there can be aliveness and joy and power that we can bring in. And just so grateful for the evolution of this conversation. Pallavi, thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page @ConsciousArtistPodcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.